Hello, everyone online and in person. Thank you all so much for being here for our Advisor 101 and Student Org Funding Workshop. My name is Amanda Zimmerman, and I am a coordinator of student organizations, and I focus primarily on our event application process as well as our advisor support. And so today we will be going over a quick introduction to UNT Student Activities, all of the different services we provide, the different aspects of our office, as well as some of the student organization basics, what the role of an advisor is. And then we'll jump into general policies and procedures that are related to student organizations, events, everything like that. And then we'll get to a conversation on student organization finances, as well as fundraising and funding opportunities. And then we'll do a quick OrgSync tour so that you can be as familiar as possible with OrgSync and know how to utilize it best to serve your organizations. And then we will have an explicit time for questions at the end, but if y'all have any questions as we're going, please don't hesitate to let me know. But we can go ahead and go into our introduction of UNT Student Activities. So Student Activities is comprised of a lot of different moving parts. Just under our student organizations portions, we have over 400 registered student organizations on campus currently. These include our sports clubs, fraternities and sororities, academic-focused organizations, honorary organizations, hobby-based organizations, anything that you can think of. We have that on campus for our students. We also offer officer support as well as some developmental opportunities such as SOLD workshops and our CEO prep series for our student leaders. We also offer our New Org Bootcamp, which offers new organizations that are in the process of forming the opportunity to learn more about what it means to be an advisor and a new organization on campus. And then we offer involvement advising to help students find out how to get involved on campus, whether that's through student organizations, recommended departments, as well as different events that might be happening on campus. And then we also offer a way to recognize our awesome student organization members, as well as their advisors at our Eagle Awards program. And then we also do presentation requests. So if you ever need us to come speak to a class, you want us to come help at one of your organizational meetings, we are more than happy to join you and speak on any subject that you might want us to attend to. We also have our Spirit and Tradition section, which houses our different spirit and tradition related organizations, such as North Texas Cheer and Dancers, our mascot, including the celebration of his birthday, as well as our spirit organization Talons. Lastly, we also offer campus-wide events through our office, including Founders Day, University Day, homecoming events. All of those really large events that you see happening on campus are through our office for the most part. And these offer students the opportunity to engage with the campus on a huge scale for the most usually. And so our mission at Student Activities is to promote a sense of community and loyalty to UNT by providing students the opportunity to grow through student organizations, involvement on campus. And we want to make sure that students, as well as offering them the opportunity to grow in their citizenship, their leadership skills, and their community building skills. So in general, the role of student activities is to support all of these different functions that are happening throughout our office. But kind of getting into like the small detail-oriented things, we help with organization registration and orientation to ensure that our organizations are in compliance with university policy regarding being registered, as well as making sure that they're prepared for success by knowing the different functions of a student organization. We also offer the developmental opportunities, such as the CEO Prep Summit, the CEO Dinner, as well as our different SOLD workshops, which are sometimes geared towards a specific skill associated with a leadership position, or they're just general leadership development workshops. We facilitate the event application process to ensure that events happening on campus are safe as they can be, are promoted well to the student body, but also just to make sure that you'll get room reservations and all of those little things. We offer the opportunity for some marketing opportunities, whether that be an involvement fair, promoting organizations that win Student of the Month, Student Org of the Month, and everything like that. We also offer assistance and consultation, whether that's related to a specific issue the organization is facing, you're having some trouble planning an event on campus, whatever it may be. We are here to answer your questions. Next, we also offer some OrgSync assistance. So if you're ever having trouble navigating OrgSync, finding what you need to take care of, or you were a student here previously and somehow OrgSync is still sending emails to that student account instead of your work account, we're able to get that fixed for you. And lastly, we really do help with policy and procedure awareness and enforcement, just to make sure that student organizations and you as their advisors are aware of the different regulations that student organizations need to abide by. And then making sure that any conversations that need to happen after, whether it's a violation of policy or just something that isn't going right, that we're able to speak with y'all about that. And in general, when it comes to how officers and advisors can interact with our office, you can always encourage your students to attend involvement advising and just to get involved on campus, whether that's promoting the student organization that you advise in your classroom setting, including a resource in your syllabus about finding ways to get involved on campus, those kinds of things. Another one is attending advisor workshops such as this. So thank you all for being here. You can check that one off your list. We have a few more advisor workshop opportunities this semester as well, and we'll just email you all the same way we did for this one. Next is notifying us of any questions or concerns that you have, whether that's related to a portion of the event application process, or you notice that there is some conflict going on within your organization and you'd like some feedback or assistance in addressing that. And then next you can notify or invite your colleagues to also become an organization advisor, whether this is somebody that is a new full-time staff member in your department or someone that now has maybe a bit more time, but they are able to volunteer to be a student organization advisor through an OrgSync form. And they just let us know who they are, where they work, and which organizations they'd be willing to serve. Next, follow us on social media. This is a really great way to stay in the know about all of the different things happening that are related to student organizations. This is also where we highlight our different organizations that are doing well through our Student Org of the Month, through Eagle Awards, and shout outs. Last, it's important to discuss any updates that you receive or see from us with your organizational members, just to make sure that they're keeping in the know and didn't miss an important date in an email or anything like that. So the basics of student organizations. In general, all organizations must be registered to function on campus as an affiliate of UNT, and they must apply for registration and attend the orientation sessions that are now offered through Canvas every academic year. So once someone does it in, let's say, August or September of that academic year, they are good to go until the next academic year begins. And the orientation sessions on Canvas cover student org funding, how to submit an events application, and everything like that, so that they are aware of what they need to be doing throughout the year. In general, an organization must have at least 2 officers, as well as 1 full-time faculty or staff advisor to function as an organization on campus. And they also must have a membership of at least 8 UNT students. There are some exceptions to this rule depending on the circumstances. And so if your organization needs an exemption based on either just like the organization nationally has something going on and they're not able to recruit or whatever it may be, let us know what that situation is and we'll help fix anything that needs to be taken care of on the roster. When it comes to the registration process, this is facilitated through OrgSync, and the privileges of being a registered student organization include the ability to reserve rooms on campus, whether that's a meeting space in the union, a classroom space, or any of our other great reservable spaces on campus. You have the ability to participate in certain events such as involvement fairs, Mean Green Fling, Mean Green Spring Fling, the orientation tabling opportunities, which are a really great recruitment tool. Next, you have the ability to utilize OrgSync. OrgSync is a super great platform that has the capability of storing files, processing elections, and keeping track of your organizational membership records. And there's so much going on that website that you're able to utilize for your organization. Next, you're able to have advertising assistance, whether that's Mean Green Fling or anything like that. And y'all are also able to be eligible to receive and apply for funding, which we'll talk about in a second, whether that's funding through the Student Government Association or through our office. And in general, when it comes to your org sync profile, it is important to make sure that that president or primary contact is keeping that up to date as much as possible. Because we never want the situation to be where the former president has graduated, no longer is looking at their student email, bless you, and is not able to be reached. And now all of the information in your org sync isn't accessible to you until we can figure out on the back end you getting added onto that roster. There is a process though, so if that's ever the case and you're unable to get in contact with that primary contact, just let us know. But in general, as you prepare for registration on OrgSync, your officer that is filling out that registration will need to know the number of active members, as well as all of your information as an advisor, your contact info, the department you work for, everything like that. Next, they'll need officer info, including their name, their title for that officer position, as well as their EUID and email. Preferably, this is that email that is their email address on OrgSync. We don't necessarily want their Gmail, their Yahoo. We want at my.unc.edu. And then lastly, they'll need an updated constitution. Even if there were no changes made from year to year, it's always a great thing to go in with that new advisory board, new executive board, whoever may be there, to make sure that they are aware of the different regulations put in that constitution. And then in general, with that timeline and the process of getting that confirmation email, depending on the time of the semester, generally this can take anywhere from like 2 weeks, depending on the volume. And so particularly at the beginning of each semester or in those high registration time periods is where there might be a bit of a delay. But generally, if they have submitted that application and the president and advisor have given it their approval, it is on our queue and we're able to go in and view it. And then for some officer eligibility information, officers of student organizations must maintain a 2.4 cumulative UNT GPA. This is checked at the beginning of each semester just to make sure that all advisors and officers are aware of any ineligibility for, say, a treasurer position or a secretary. Next, if they are an undergraduate student, they must be enrolled in a minimum of 6 undergraduate credit hours. And then if they are a graduate student pursuing either a master's degree or a doctoral degree, they must be enrolled in at least 5 hours. Or if they are actively completing their dissertation or thesis, that is only a 3 credit hour requirement. And so if they're also doing those, they have a little bit less hours that they have to take for our office for being an advisor. There are exemption requests that can be submitted if a student happens to have not the GPA that they need or they're enrolled in fewer hours than usual that semester, that are observed and solved on a case-by-case basis. And then for advisor requirements, all advisors must be, well, all primary advisors must be full-time employees, at least 22 years of age, and then not pursuing an undergraduate degree at UNT. And then they also must complete the risk management training and quiz through our office, as well as any trainings that they must do through the university, whether that's Title IX training, CSA training, everything like that. And I made the addendum that only primary advisors, as Chad mentioned earlier, there are some graduate students that y'all have helping you out for advising organizations that might be part of their graduate assistant position or something like that. And so it's important for them to get that experience, but we also do need that full-time staff accountability on the roster at least. So the role of the advisor, I want to get a quick pulse check. So if y'all are online, you can put it in the chat, or if you're in person, why do you advise? Could be part of your job, and that checks Chad. But it also could be that you are passionate about this subject. So why do y'all advise the organizations that you advise?
It was assigned.
It was assigned. Okay.
But I am.
Yeah. What do you enjoy about advising so far?
Student interaction.
Okay. What about y'all?
Thank you, like role is development.
Yeah. For a lot of the students in these organizations, it is a really big time of growth and development. It's so awesome to see that and get that reward as that advisor for their student organization. And then in the chat, we had building community and creating safe spaces for students, passionate about mission. So awesome. everyone has a reason why they choose to advise, whether it's about building that community, bringing an organization to the campus that they were involved in as a student. But it's important to take that in mind and keep it in either the back of your head or just keep it in your perspective as you navigate your organizational time as an advisor. But in general, an advisor, this is pulled directly from our website. So this is what people that are new to student organization world at UNT will see when it comes to being an advisor. But in general, the advisor experience is a spectrum. No one advisor is going to have the same experience. And that could be because of the relation to the academic field that they are a professor in, or it's something that's assigned to them for their job, and so they're coming at it from a different lens. But there are a multitude of different experiences that you have as an advisor, and so much of that is based on your interaction with the organization, that contract essentially that you forge with this organization based on their expectations of you, what support they need from you, and what support you're able to offer. And in general, being an advisor is a learning experience. Even though I'm standing up here, there are so many more things that I can learn about being a student organization advisor by working with a different type of student org than I'm usually used to working with, by working with a totally online student org, anything like that. And so being an advisor means being open to learning new things about maybe the organization that you're advising, learning more about UNT policies, everything like that. Next, being an advisor is a living agreement. And it's also kind of an experiment at times. You can go into a new executive board and you're starting a new academic year fresh with these new officers. And it could be a completely different experience than the year that you had previously based on the conversations that you have with this new executive board. So being open to change, being open to flexing how you are navigating that advisor relationship is super important. And lastly, you don't need to be an expert to be an advisor. You don't have to be, for example, if you were going to advise a dance organization, you don't have to be a dancer yourself or even be somebody who has danced. As long as you're willing to learn and grow with the group and support them and answer their questions, you don't have to be a professor of dance or anything like that. But in general, some of the logistical items of being an advisor are having completed that risk management training and the quiz, of course, which is only a one-time commitment as long as it's done within your tenure of being an advisor. If you happen to take a few years off or you go and teach somewhere else and then come back to UNT after a period of time, you will need to redo that training. But any relevant changes in law or policy by the university will be communicated to you all as well. You do have to do form review on OrgSync, whether that's some of the funding request forms that we'll talk about later today, or the registration form. Next is keeping up with communication from student activities. This could look like keeping up with what we post on social media if you use social media, keeping up with our emails, everything like that. Next is reviewing events applications and giving your thumbs up. This is a super crucial part of being an advisor. And some students will say that this is the most important because they're always like, we want to have this event right now. But this is very important so that you also are kept in the loop about what your student organization is doing and what potential levels of risk they might be getting into with those events. Alongside this goes with checking OrgSync often. Sometimes OrgSync sends multiple emails at one time and you don't necessarily go and click through each and every single comment that has come through on your events application. But it is important to keep tabs on the different forms that your organization has submitted and everything like that to make sure that you're not missing out on key information or requests from you as an advisor. Next, there is the possibility that you will need to attend an event safety committee meeting. We'll talk about what an event safety committee meeting is a bit later as we talk about the event application process. But in general, as an advisor, this is a really great time for you to support the org and stay in tune with what they are doing on campus. Next, any additional or annual series trainings that are required by UNT, it's of course important to keep up with those because if you're not in compliance with those laws, you're no longer eligible to be an advisor. And then providing relevant advice as well as context for the organization. As the advisor, y'all are sometimes one of the most consistent portions of a student organization's executive team, and it's very helpful for you to not necessarily keep a detailed journal of every single interaction that you have, but at least to provide some of the context about what elections have looked like previously or what a certain event looked like previously, because you do provide very valuable knowledge and experience as that advisor and as that faculty or staff representative for the organization. But in general, as it comes to supporting student organizations, it's important that you communicate with them, whether that's communicating with them when you're going to be out of the office or like you're going to be out of the country on a trip and not available to read your email so that they know, okay, I need to submit all of my event applications before then, or I need to submit our funding request for this conference coming up before then. And so this is also important for setting those boundaries or setting those expectations for how you want the organization to communicate with you. If you're comfortable and you want to give them your cell phone number and they have free reign to text you whenever you want, that is your choice and that's okay. But some people are more comfortable with having their email be the main form of communication, and that is also okay. As long as that's something that you're both talking about and agreeing upon. Next, as the organization advisor, it is helpful if you help with mediating conflict and promoting positive organizational dynamics. As the advisor, if you see that the students are really struggling with the planning of a certain event, or there was an election and it didn't turn out exactly how the organizational members thought that it would, and there's some turmoil in the organization, it's important for you as that advisor to step in and be supportive, to go in and facilitate those conversations potentially, or at least reach out to our office for assistance if you are not comfortable or not able to have those conversations with the organization. And then when it comes to promoting positive organizational dynamics, the role that an advisor plays in this can be very different. But if you're an advisor and the students are having some sort of dispute in the organization and they try to pull you into it as the advisor, it's important for you to try to remain objective, as well as keeping in mind that you are there to support the organization as a whole, not just this one student who might have something to say about another student on the executive board, whatever that situation may be. Next, it's important to provide constructive feedback as well as promote critical thinking with your organization. This could look like attending those exec board meetings that they're having, and after an event asking, okay, where do you think the issue might be coming from that y'all experienced at this event? Something didn't go right, what do you think was the root cause of that issue? And having those conversations with them, as well as just providing some general feedback, even if that's praise and recognition, saying, hey, y'all did a really great job on this event, or you did a really great job handling this issue as an organization. Next, it is important to attend their events and be present as able, of course, or as available. There are those times where their organization meetings interferes with your class, or that you might be out of town for a family commitment at the time that they're having their banquet or whatever it may be. But in general, it is important to try to show up as you can and be present as you are available. Next, it's important to provide encouragement as well as providing guidance and recognition for the organization. If they see that you are paying attention and that you see them having these small victories or big victories, it's important for them to feel supported as students working with you. Next, it's important to help students find balance, whether that's helping them navigate their very first exec position while they also balance their class load and their workload, other student organizations they may be a part of, and helping them find that sweet spot of time management. Next, it's important to promote goal setting, strategic planning, and accountability as an advisor. You don't necessarily have to sit there and say, okay, as the organization, here are the 3 things that we're going to accomplish this year. But you should at least promote and say, hey, what are your goals as president for this organization? What are your fundraising goals to potentially a fundraising chair? As well as helping them with planning event logistics potentially, or looking at their nomination and election process to make sure that both, not only are they looking at the big picture, but also making sure that they're getting those details planned as well. And then with accountability as an advisor, it's very important to practice this. Because organizations and their officers are going to make mistakes. They're going to put wrong information on their social media or have a low attended event, but it's important to take accountability and recognize where things went wrong, what potential role you may have had in them or the student organization may have had in those, and have those critical conversations. And then lastly, it's important to assist with the officer transition process. I mentioned earlier that one of the big roles or the logistical pieces of being an advisor is providing context and continuity. This is one of those ways in which you can help develop and continuously grow the organization and help promote that long-term success. So some general policies and procedures to keep in mind relate to the event application process, and then we'll jump into some of the UNT policies in a second with where you can find them in the policy library. But the event application process covers anything that is an event happening on campus, whether that's a fundraising event, a general officer meeting, a general body meeting, a 5K on campus, anything like that, where you are going to be meeting on campus, an event application must be submitted. The only exemptions or times when this doesn't apply are if your organization is meeting completely online, they're meeting only off campus, or it's only a tabling activity, where if they were at this table in the union and everything fit on this table, that doesn't need to be an event application. But as soon as they have like a dunk tank associated with it, or they're doing pie in the face, that does need to be an event application, just so we can make sure that they are using safe materials and everything like that. But the event application deadlines related to when you need to submit everything by and when you need to answer questions, etc. Low risk events must be submitted at least 5 business days in advance. And so around times where there's a lot of university closure or holidays or anything like that, it is important to keep in mind that that might impact our processing timeline. And then for high risk events, the deadline is 15 business days in advance, just to make sure that all of the necessary campus partners, whether that be the police department, UNT risk management, youth protective services, insurance, etc., are able to address the event application and take care of any contracts or anything else that needs to be taken care of. And then in general, every semester, there are no events permitted during finals, pre-finals, or reading day, because that is a no programming period for the university, and this applies to student organizations. So for this semester, that timeline specifically is May 1st through the 10th. So they are not able to have their exec meetings, general body meetings, and this also applies to online events as well as off-campus events. Those are all prohibited during this time, just so that students are able to focus on their student responsibilities of studying, taking those exams, etc. I mentioned the Event Safety Committee earlier. The Event Safety Committee is part of our event process because they keep student organizations that might be having larger risk events or events that have very high attendance or whatever it may be, help keep them within some safety guidelines as well as general risk management tips and tricks. And then before I go through the different tips for submitting event applications, over here on the right side of the screen is a quick breakdown of the event application process. So in general, once a student organization submits their event application on OrgSync by pressing submit, it is only considered completed at that point. And for it to reach that full submission status, it has to get the president and advisor thumbs up. Now, if y'all have multiple advisors on your roster or multiple people listed as president and primary contact, it will tag all of those people. So if you happen to have 4 people total, all 4 people will need to give their thumbs up before it can move on to the next level of review. That next level review is typically where those reservations are made, as well as general questions are asked, whether that's about the food vendors or any insurance contracts that might need to be made. But this is where people will start putting those comments in the comment section of the event application. And those are for you or preferably your officers to fill out. And then after that point is when the event safety meeting will happen. And at that event safety meeting, there will be an event safety planner that is discussed with the organization that will go over any stipulations and requirements to have that event on campus, whether that's requiring wristbands at the event, requiring the music to be turned off at a certain time to abide by any city ordinances, everything like that. And then lastly, after all of that is taken care of, after all the questions are answered, the event safety planner is returned, the event can be approved overall. And that is what will add it to the org calendar, where student organizations or students that aren't involved yet are able to see those events. But in general, with some of those tips, be sure to be as descriptive as possible with those. Be flexible when it comes to dates and locations. We are in the BLB right now for those of us here in person, and this is one of the most popular buildings on campus for student org meetings. And so it's kind of like a dogfight a little bit at the beginning of the semesters, especially to get the BLB because they love this building. But it's not necessarily feasible for every organization to meet here all at the same time and everything like that. So be as flexible as possible. And if you happen to be an advisor that has reserving capabilities for non-110 level classes, and you are processing those reservations for, say, an art studio or a lab in one of the buildings, then you are responsible for helping us by providing that confirmation, which should include the dates, time, the location, everything like that, so that we can make sure that the student organization does have a place to meet at that day and time. Next, make sure you're keeping those OrgSync notifications on, as well as communicating with your team when they are submitting an event application to come up with some sort of plan for your organization. So that if they submit a student organization event application and that y'all's process is to then send a text into the group chat that has president, advisor, and the like social chair in it, so that everybody knows something has been submitted. Whatever works for y'all works for us. And then lastly, be sure to submit event applications as early as possible and don't wait until the last second to get those in. Whether that's to make sure that y'all are getting the room that you want, as well as making sure that any elements of risk can be addressed by the event safety committee. So on the screen are a few of the different related or relevant policies for student organizations. I will be sharing the slides and this will be available afterwards, so don't feel as though you have to like memorize everything on here. But in general, when it comes to posting on campus or branding opportunities, any solicitations that are posted on campus must be posted on designated bulletin boards, sign holders, yard signs, or digital boards. So I can't just come in here and like tape something up on the whiteboard because this is a classroom and it's not a designated space for hanging. But in general, we want to make sure that we are keeping flyers, etc., where they're supposed to be and not just randomly around buildings. And in general, flyers cannot be posted on walls, windows, doors, glass, tile, or other surfaces that are not specifically designated or designed for this purpose, just to make sure that if somebody came in with a push pin and tried to put a bunch of different flyers up here, that we're not damaging the wall, etc. Next, when it comes to utilizing yard signs on campus, a lot of organizations either use them for recruitment purposes or promoting a certain event. Those are allowed to be placed basically where others are on campus. There are a few designated spots, such as the areas out in front of the union, over near the BL, like out front of the BLB, everything like that. But student organizations can only be posted, or a student organization sign can only be posted for up to 10 days if it's for an event, or they have to be taken down 2 days after that event. And so signs that are specific to an event should be taken down within a timely manner just to make sure that those are not taking up space that other people could be using or out getting damaged by the weather, etc. Next, each use of UNT branding is required to gain approval from University Branding and Strategy, just to make sure that we're not like putting a pink eagle, which is against like the identity guide on a t-shirt, or like really changing the logo of UNT. It's very important for them, especially that we're keeping within those guidelines and keeping within the certain regulations for any branding. Next, when it comes to solicitation and fundraising, student organizations are permitted to engage in solicitation on campus, whether that's soliciting for membership and recruiting students or promoting a certain event, accepting donations, etc. And this is all permitted through the university. However, organizations aren't allowed to like sell food, drink, etc. And so as soon as it becomes some sort of like actual purchase of a paleta, purchase of an agua fresca or anything like that, that is where it becomes something against policy. And then the selling or distribution of food on campus is prohibited. The only time that it's not prohibited is if there is like an explicit kind of okay or approval given by UNT Risk Management Services and Dining Services. We'll talk a little bit about dining services rules and regulations on the Union House Guidelines slide. But in general, I would stray away from bake sales, especially bake sales of homemade goods, just because there are a whole bunch of regulations about food safety, as well as any raffles, as those are illegal. And then lastly, the free speech and public assembly policy. Gatherings related to free speech or expressive activity are not governed or like overseen necessarily by student activities. We do not reserve the right to say, yes, you can have a protest, or yes, you can have a march on campus. And those are navigated through the Dean of Students office, particularly through their kind of communication routes to make sure that any reservations are made, and that if you happen to have a march where you're going to go all the way across campus, across different thoroughfares, across different buildings, et cetera, that people are aware, and that you're not accidentally going to create some sort of safety hazard or block off a street for a very long period of time, everything like that. And then they do have advanced notice required if you are going to have any amplified sound or you will be crossing those public thoroughfares, just to make sure that they can notify their different campus partners. And then the last portion of this policy and procedures is the Union House Guidelines. A lot of our student organizations utilize the union, and they have a bit more restrictions or a bit more of kind of guidelines on what can and cannot be done in their spaces. So in general, I definitely recommend either scanning the QR code sometime later or just searching for the Union House Guidelines, because some of their stuff has also changed recently. But in general, the union for student organizations is reserved through the event publication process. And that is the only way that student organizations should be going through reserving a special event space or one of the meeting spaces. And then the different union spaces that are able to be reserved include special event spaces such as the Lyceum, the ballroom, the patio that's on the 4th floor, as well as meeting rooms, which include the smaller rooms on the 2nd, 3rd floors, mostly. And then for tabling, the union also manages both the union and the areas outside of the union for any tabling activities. And so they will be who you get that permission or that like reservation from for tabling. And tabling doesn't have to be an event app as long as it's on the table. But in general, they have event resources and audio and visual services that may come at an additional cost, just depending on what your organization needs. But those services include room setup based on like the number of people that y'all are going to have, if y'all are having food at the event, etc. But when it comes to audio visual services as well, they have sound technicians, lighting technicians, etc. on their staff to help take care of any lighting and sound needs that you need. There are some different time limits that apply to student organizations making reservations. So all events must end by 11 p.m. unless prior permission has been granted by the union. The only reason that this hard cutoff exists is because if an organization were to have a meeting until, say, midnight, they're having their end of the year banquet, they're celebrating, they're giving out awards, they're dancing, and they want to go until midnight. From that 11 p.m. to that midnight point, there will be additional staff that is required to stay late, and their pay is impacted by that as well. And so there will be additional charges for having after hours staff, and the building needs to make, and they need to make sure that the building is still accessible and navigable at that time. Next, one-time event reservations are limited to 4 hours of space at no additional cost. Now, if an organization is having an all-day conference and they want to use the ballroom, then there is an additional cost associated with anything past those original 4 hours of use. And then series reservations are limited to one meeting per week that lasts up to 1.5 hours. And this is just to make sure also that as many student organizations are able to use the space to ensure equal distribution of the ability to use those rooms. And if you happen to need an additional room, because you're gonna have two kind of activities going on at the same time, or you just need another room because you're gonna have a speaker and this going on, not only would you submit the change request to your event application, but you would be able to let the union know that you would need a second room 5 business days in advance of that meeting. Because usually their processing timeline is also 5 business days. But in general, organizations are also limited to 2 late night events per semester in the union, pending availability and approval. And this is also just to make sure that one organization isn't having a super late night event every single week and requiring the union to have too much staff stay after hours. And then in general, student organizations are encouraged to purchase all of their food through Verde Catering on campus. But if they are not in a special event space, and they're in one of those meeting spaces, and they are allowed to bring in prepackaged food or food from an approved vendor. That's someone with an unexpired health license, essentially. But food safety is able to provide more information in that event application process. But that is permitted for meetings that are scheduled after 5 p.m. Monday through Friday and on the weekends, in any room that is used for a student org meeting that is a general meeting space. So not in the ballroom, not in the Lyceum, but in like Union 341 type rooms. And then lastly, student organizations that are looking to hold a large open event, whether that's a new member presentation for some of our Greek organizations or a large banquet, there is the requirement that you use the university union ticketing system, which the union takes care of setting up all of the technological things on the back end, everything like that. But there are some general requirements related to that to make sure that capacity isn't being exceeded. And so we're going to transition now into fundraising and funding opportunities. But I wanted to check in first just to see what are some of the most common questions that y'all get from your student organizations related to money, funding, anything like that. And I'll try to answer them as best as I can. If it's like, how do we get $1 million? I can't answer that one. We need money. Okay. Okay. There is an application process, but it isn't too much. So it's not like they're filling out 20 pages of anything like that. And so fundraising ideas, okay, perfect. That is also how I have included. So I'm glad that I'm prepared for this. But in general, for student org finances, because I wanted to kind of give an overview of this before we really jump into the nitty-gritty of what fundraising or funding applications look like on campus. When opening or updating a bank account, which are completely optional, student organizations do not need a bank account to function. We don't require them to have one. And so it is an optional thing that a student organization can get. But student activities only assist with providing a letter stating that that student organization is a registered organization and confirm that they are in good standing within the university, while also confirming who is being added, et cetera, to the account. Because we don't want a student organization to have some random student also from like TWU on there. And so we're able to help provide that confirmation. But for any specific bank or tax related questions, we are not licensed tax professionals by any means. We don't work for the banks, and so we cannot necessarily give you explicit financial or tax advice. And so if you have any specific questions, I would recommend checking out the Money Matters webpage first, but then consulting with a bank or tax professional or a provider to go over the different questions that you may have. This also could look like asking the IRS specifically about the employer identification number. But in general, when you open a bank account, you will need that employer identification number or EIN from the IRS through their SS4 form. This can be completed online. And if you have any questions throughout that process, we will refer you to the IRS for all of those questions just because they are the professionals. They know what their forms all entail, and we don't want to potentially give you not 100% accurate or outdated advice. And so 100% go through the IRS for those questions. And that is required to open up a bank account as an organizational bank account. Once you get that EIN, you will then apply through the form for the checking account verification request form on OrgSync. That will verify that the organization is a registered organization, as well as verify who is being added onto the account. And then once the student organization has received that PDF file that is emailed to you, you are able to go to the bank in person to open the account. Of course, the details depend on which specific bank that you're going with, whether it's Wells Fargo, DATQ, Chase, Bank of America, whoever else. But in general, organizations are able to choose who they bank with and navigate those conversations with the banks to make sure that they have everything that they need. When it comes to tax exempt status, a lot of organizations want to be tax exempt or think that they're tax exempt already because they're affiliated with UNT. But for the most part, that is not accurate. A lot of our organizations that are not affiliated with national bodies are not already tax exempt. Some of our fraternities and sororities or those national or international honorary societies do have tax exempt status through those headquarters. But if an organization were to want to apply for tax exempt status, they would need to consult basically a tax professional to take care of all of those paperwork and make sure that everything gets filed correctly. But essentially it cannot be done through UNT, and UNT does not provide their EIN out to anyone else, or the tax ID to get tax exempt status. We don't provide that. And we definitely recommend seeking professional assistance with that if that is something that your organization wants to pursue. And then lastly, the advisor's role related to organization finances is really to provide that oversight, provide that advice related to organizational spending, keeping track of income and everything like that, while also promoting ethical and responsible use of those funds. If you see the organization is continuously going out and they're all getting boba or they're all getting Starbucks every single time that they have an exec meeting, and they're doing it on the organization's like dime, that's not necessarily ethical or like a responsible use of the funds that have been collected either through donations, have been collected through dues, etc. And so as it relates to org finances as well, in general, organizations should complete a budget annually, whether that's creating one from scratch or using a template that they already have, but they should be going through and assessing where they're at financially and making those decisions on at least an annual basis. If they want to go in every semester, they can also do that too. And this should typically line up with their officer transition schedule usually. Next, it's important that incoming and outgoing officers are involved in this conversation as well to make sure that any questions or insight that the outgoing officers can be discussed with those incoming officers as well. And then the budget also should be shared and agreed upon by members. It shouldn't be a secret what money is getting spent on. It shouldn't be ominous about, oh, where are our dues going? People should have the right to know about where their money is going and what it's being used for. We have a question in the chat. Can students open the account without the advisor adding their information? So there does need to be some, when getting an EIN, I've looked at the form a little bit, and so this is not tax advice. This is not legal advice. There is the ability, or you have to provide someone's social security number to get an EIN from the IRS. This doesn't need to be an advisor's EIN information or social security information. It can be one of the officers, it can be the president, but there does have to be that personal information given. And then that information can be changed over time. So if somebody submits their social security number as the or to get that EIN, they can then change the affiliation later on through the IRS. But there is a certain timeline on that process and everything. And so 100% go through the IRS for any of those types of questions. But okay, I hope that answered your question, Tammy. Perfect. Okay, thanks. And then when it comes to creating a budget, there are different types of budgets that an organization can operate on. And it really depends on what works best for that organization. Do they just want to have one budget that outright goes over like everything in one document, and you can like switch the sheets and it talks about the different ways that the money is being spent, the different income that is happening. But you can also break down your budget through a positional budget where the president gets X number of money, the secretary gets X number of money, the new member educator gets this number. Or you can do a program-based budget where you're allocating a certain number to recruitment opportunities. You're allocating a certain number to social opportunities. You're allocating to member development, everything like that. Or you can break it down even more concise into specific events. And so you could say, okay, for our recruitment week, where we're going to have a few different recruitment events, we get $500 for this. And then for our social at the midpoint of the semester, we get this much money. And so really depending on what works best for the org is what decision y'all would make related to the kind of budget. But it is important as the advisor to know what kind of budget they're operating on, and also to make sure that they're not overspending or going over their budgeted amount and potentially messing up the finances for the org overall. And then lastly, it's important to keep track of the different records related to your organizational finances, whether that's keeping track of all of your incoming money, whether that's through donations, fundraisers, technically, like if you were to do some sort of online fundraiser, all of that money would be there, membership dues, as well as outgoing funds, just so that you can keep track of making sure you're not spending more than is coming in. Next, it's also important to know where your money is coming from and going to. If you see on your bank statement that there is $15 each month coming out and you're not sure what that is, it's important to know what that is so that you're not accidentally spending money on something that is not needed or no longer used. It's also important to not forget about any administrative or any of those recurring charges that might come annually. So let's say your organization utilizes some newsletter and y'all have $20 every month going, or every year going out to newsletter something. It's important to make sure that y'all know when those are going to go out. It's also important to keep checking in on your budget regularly and make adjustments as needed. If you are $500 less or $500 below what you expected to spend on your social budget for that semester, if you're not wanting to carry that money over, it's important to then reallocate and figure out where those funds are going to go. And then it's also important to decide on a secure way to store your records. If the record keeping changes every single time the officer changes, then there's the possibility of losing out on valuable information from year to year. And in general, as the advisor, you should help the organization promote by encouraging them to promote financial transparency, setting goals related to organizational finances, helping them stay organized and keep records, as well as creating a budget that works for them. And so the moment we've all been waiting for, funding opportunities. So there are 3 major funding opportunities that we really promote to student organizations on campus. The first 2 on the screen are from the Student Government Association, and then the last one is through Student Activities. But the first 2 from the Student Government Association are the Ralph Travel Grant and Eagle's Nest Fund. The Ralph Travel Grant is a reimbursement program that is run through the Student Government Association to promote and assist students as they travel related to university business, whether that's going to an annual conference for, like their student organization is about engineering and they're going to this annual engineering conference, or they are part of a fraternity or sorority and they want to travel to their annual gathering where all the presidents come together, whatever it may be. But eligible students are able to receive 1 award of up to $750 per semester. Students can be funded once only per semester, just to make sure that one student isn't amassing like $5,000 worth of conference travel in one semester. But it also just makes sure that we're not spending all of our money in one place. Or you can also apply as a student organization, where a student organization can receive up to $3,000 of funding per conference. And so if a student organization is all wanting to go as a group to a conference in California, then they put in that application all together, and we'll check the eligibility of everyone, look at what they're wanting to spend money on, and process it that way. And then the Eagles Nest funding is funding that is available through the Student Government Association for on-campus events that are open to the entire student body, at no cost, that serve the betterment of campus life. So if it's something and they're charging $20 a ticket, or it's happening off campus at the Texas Motor Speedway or something like that, that is not eligible. But in general, all student organizations that are registered are eligible to apply for this funding. And the application process for Eagles Nest and the route travel grant are relatively similar, so I'll say them both together. Essentially, a student representative from the organization or the individual applying for funding will need to attend a resource meeting. These are currently held on Thursday afternoon. I won't say the exact building number because I might get the numbers wrong, but it's in the language building, I believe. But they meet with the director of allocations, and he will go over the entire process from start to finish, how to get that money afterwards, etc. But then after they submit their application, for the event-related application, they will also need to submit their event application, as well as the funding application. And for the travel one, they will just submit that funding application. If it's for a student organization, they will give their thumbs up from the president and advisor. And then once all of that has been done, the student organization or individual will be invited to present at the allocations committee. Once the presentation has been given, the allocations committee will decide on how much is awarded, and the student organization will be notified via email. For Eagles Nest, there is technically not a max funding for Eagles Nest, but any request over $3,000 has to be approved by the SGA president. So technically, an organization could get like $20,000 of funding. Would the allocations committee do that? Probably not. But there, once it's past that 3,000, there is the approval requirement for student organization officers. And then once they receive that award letter for the Ralph Travel Grant, the students will go on their trip, collect their itemized receipts and submit those for reimbursement. And then for the Eagles Nest funding, once they have received that award letter, all of the purchasing will be completed. And depending on who the vendor is, where those items are coming from, it will either be purchased through our office, or they will place the order and we will confirm the chart string for like Verde, Design Works, the Union, etc. Okay, so the last major funding opportunity is student organization funding, which is offered through Student Activities. And student org funding from our office is a program that enables student organizations to receive funding for things that weren't necessarily eligible or covered by the Eagles Nest or the Ralph Travel Grant. And so all registered student organizations are eligible to receive this funding, as long as they are not student service fee utilizing organizations or student service fee receiving organizations. And then to apply, they just have to fill out the 2023-2024 student org funding request form that is on OrgSync, and that gets reviewed by our team at Student Activities. And some of the items that people have put on this request form before have been t-shirts, a tablecloth for tabling, different promotional items, buttons, stickers. There are some organizations that will use it for their closed organizations meeting to get like a gavel or something like that. But in general, these items are ordered by Student Activities, and then the organization is able to pick them up from our office, or if we happen to order them from like, or if stuff is ordered from like Design Works or something, they'll be able to pick it up from Design Works typically, depending on what they arrange with us. And so in addition to those three funding opportunities, there are a variety of different sources of income that orgs can tap into, whether that's some profit shares or give back nights. Recently, I've seen a lot of organizations utilize Cane's, Chipotle. None of this is sponsored, but sometimes like Share Tea or Kung Fu Tea will do give back nights. But they can do those. They can utilize online platforms for fundraising, whether that's CrowdChange, GoFundMe, etc. They are also able to have sponsorship, whether that's for the organization in general or for a specific event, where local businesses or even non-local organizations are able to contribute funds in exchange for advertisement usually, or for some sort of feature on that event program, the t-shirt, etc. Next, a great source of income are those membership dues or fees. And if those aren't already being used, say like your membership fee pays for your t-shirt or something like that, those are a great way to like start with your baseline for your budget. Next, alumni donations. Alumni sometimes are able to provide assistance, and they want to give back to the different student organizations or departments that really impacted them during their time as a student. So they're a great resource. Next are social media fundraisers, such as those bingo cards where like they'll post the Instagram story with the grid and it's like fill in my box. Love those. But y'all can do something like that. They can utilize those SGA related funds from student activities. They can also utilize some specific or like special funding from student activities. We have previously done homecoming assistance where student or participating in homecoming were able to apply for extra funding from our office for those activities. And then we also do have co-sponsorships or incentives related to being awarded Student Organization of the Month or registering before certain deadlines, everything like that. So there are plenty of opportunities from our office as well. And then you can also table for donations as well as host fundraising events, whether that's like the dunk tank event or you are, I've seen some student organizations, like they'll sit out there and they'll like write you a poem for a donation. You get like a personalized poem that they write on the spot. And so there are plenty of different ways that an organization can navigate income related to their student organization. And there are different ways that they can fundraise and gather money without just expecting the student organization members to contribute out of pocket every single time that an event is happening. So I wanted to also bring this to y'all's attention. We are having a student org funding town hall this week on the 15th at 4 p.m. in the Crumley conference room. And this is just where we'll be able to answer questions related to student org funding, as well as go over any concerns or questions that you may have. I believe that I will be there, so I hope to see you all in attendance if you're interested. And so I'm going to jump over to OrgSync just for a little bit. And this will be one of our last topics before we jump in or before we close out today. And so let me just pull it up real quick. And so OrgSync is our tool for all things student organization related. OrgSync is a really great tool for promoting your organization, for recruiting new members, and keeping track of documents, everything like that. But I have on the screen now OrgSync. The homepage is a great jumping off point. As you can see, the homepage features some general announcements as well as a glimpse of some of the events that are happening on campus. So if your students are ever looking for something, they're able to check that out there. And then there's just a glimpse at the organizations you're a member of, as well as some of the news articles that are posted, and some relevant links for student involvement. But in general, on the menu, you can see that there's the events tab, which is sort of like a calendar for OrgSync and the student organizations that are putting on events. You're able to search through all of the student organizations, and it has all of them listed here. And you can also search through those organizations either through category or keyword. And then I wanted to show y'all the forms section, as this is where you would find the different forms that were mentioned in this presentation. So you can see the checking account verification request form, the RAUP travel grant applications. And usually if you just search funding or fund, you're able to pull up all of the different funding related forms that the organization will need to fill out. So if your organization is ever struggling to find those, they can all be found here. And then the last portions that I wanted to show you are the submissions tab will show you and the organization what submissions they have going on right now. Typically, as the advisor, you are not the ones that are submitting the event applications. But if you happen to be walking through OrgSync with your student org, I wanted to make sure that y'all saw that. But in general, you will see where you are needed essentially on OrgSync through your notifications tab. And this will show you when a comment is posted, when your review is requested, and when your attention is needed, essentially for an event tab, a form, anything like that. And you will also receive an email anytime that a comment is added or anything like that. And then if you are having trouble with receiving emails from OrgSync, it might be because you have an incorrect email address in your campus email address portion, which UNT, like the system just automatically puts in there for you. So if you were a student and had a different email, or you have recently gotten married and your email has changed, it might pop up something old or outdated. If that is the case, please let us know and we will be sure to help you get that fixed so that we can get you any communication that needs to come to you. But then the last portion of this section that I wanted to show you is your My Organizations tab. You're able to go through and keep track of all of your different organizations and everything like that on this portion. And then you can also access organizational information in your menu tab as well. But that is a quick glance at OrgSync for those things that you need to see. With that, I want to take the time to thank you guys for all being here today. Taking the time out of your busy schedules, everything like that, to be here and get your questions answered, and to learn a bit more about student organization life, student organization funding, and everything like that. But with that being said, does anyone have any questions? Okay. Well, if you have any further questions, please feel free to shoot me an email at the email that the invitation for this was sent, as well as feel free to shoot an email into the chat, and I'll be willing to answer it as I'm still in the room. But thank you all so much again for being here. I truly appreciate all of the work that you do as student organization advisors. Your time and energy does not go unnoticed, and we are very appreciative of you in student activities. Thank you all so much.